morning. This is Moneyline with Nancy. I am Nancy Naju. With the conversations, of course, that matter and the insights that you need. Let me begin by telling you that for more than a century, from colonial railway loans in the early 1900s to Eurobonds and multilateral financing in the 21st century, Nigeria has been borrowing. We have borrowed for infrastructure, we have borrowed for reforms, we have borrowed to stabilize the economy. But this morning, I'll be asking a harder question. What has debt built? The World Bank at certain points accounted for as much as 86% of Nigeria's multilateral debt. Between 1988 and 2017, over a third of its lending to Nigeria went into policy and reform loans, projects that are often harder to measure in terms of productivity and closer to home. Between 2015 and 2023, Nigeria recorded persistent current deficit with borrowing increasingly used to finance recurrent expenditure. When debt funds consumption rather than capital formation, the link between borrowing and growth begins to weaken. So is Nigeria's debt challenge a story of irresponsible lending or irresponsible borrowing? This morning, I'm being joined by Nigeria's former debt chief, Dr. Abraham Nwankwo, who served as Director General of the Debt Management Office from 2007 to 2017, in what appears to be one of his first major television interviews since leaving office after a decade at the helm. Dr. Nwankwo brings extensive experience from the period that followed Nigeria's landmark Paris Club exit. He has now written a book that chronicles over 100 years of Nigeria's borrowing history, laying out not just the numbers, but the structural flaws, the policy missteps, and the institutional lessons. So this is not just a conversation about debt stocks. It is a conversation about governance, about productivity, and most importantly, about fiscal discipline, and about whether Nigeria has learned from its past. So this is a must-watch interview, and it comes up shortly. But let's get started with telling you what's in the news, and we'll start by telling you that the federal government has inaugurated the board of the Nigerian Consumer Credit Corporation, Credit Corp, in a move to expand financial inclusion and strengthen access to credit. Speaking at the presidential villa in Abuja, Vice President Kashim Shettima said consumer credit is critical to Nigeria's ambition of becoming a $1 trillion economy. He disclosed that $1 billion disbursed under the scheme in the last 18 months. Established in April 2024 by the Tinubu administration, Credit Corp is designed to build a trusted credit infrastructure, reduce borrowing costs, and encourage responsible credit use to improve living standards. The federal government has moved forward with a $2 billion Chinese-backed plan to revive the long-dormant Ajaokuta Steel Company. Under a proposed production sharing model, the plant is projected to scale output to 10 million metric tons annually, with ambitions of generating up to $15 billion in exports to China. Officials say the revival of the 42-year-old facility would reposition steel production as a cornerstone of Nigeria's industrialization drive and help rebalance trade between both countries. Still in line with that, Nigeria's industrial revival drive has received a boost as Kogi State secured the license for the Ajaokuta Economic City Free Trade Zone. The certificate was presented in Abuja by the Managing Director of the Nigeria Export Processing Zones Authority to Governor Usman Ododo. The approval follows presidential authorization in November 2025 for the development of the 4,000-hectare industrial city. Governor Ododo described the license as a historic turning point that will unlock Ajaokuta steel and solid minerals potential, attract local and foreign investors, and position the state as a major economic hub in West Africa. Let's take this report. Professor Uche Waleke's third colloquium with the theme Future-Proofing Africa-Wide Economic Integration, Infrastructure, Innovation and Capital Market examined how robust infrastructure, sustained innovation and resilient capital markets can accelerate economic growth, strengthen government financing and advance sustainable development in Nigeria and across the continent. Take a listen.
Entering a new phase that requires stronger economics, smart innovation and strategic investment. At the colloquium hosted by Professor Uche Uwaleke, Chairman of Capital Markets, Structure, Innovation and Capital Markets, he made mention that to future-proof Africa's integration means not just reacting to global shifts, but anticipating them and positioning the continent for long-term growth.
Our theme, Future-Proofing Africa-Wide Economic Integration, Infrastructure, Innovation and Capital Markets, speaks not only to aspiration but to urgency. Africa stands at a defining moment. The promise of the African Continental Free Trade Area represents one of the boldest economic integration of our time. To future-proof Africa-wide integration means to ensure that the structures we build today remain relevant tomorrow. It means acknowledging that the world is changing at an unprecedented pace and that Africa must and not merely react to these changes, but anticipate them.
Speaking at the event, Senator Osita Ezunaso, Chairman Senate Committee on Capital Markets and Institutions, said the forum aims to bridge the gap between policymakers, scholars, and also sustainable development requires collaboration.
As the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, we value platforms like this that promote a genuine handshake between the town and the gown. Sustainable development cannot occur in silos. Policymakers need the benefit of research and critical inquiry. Scholars need to understand the realities of market and governance.
The Accountant General of the Federation, Babatunde Ogunjemi, said Nigeria's capital market remains a major financial gateway in West Africa, supporting investment and economic growth.
Nigeria's capital market continues to serve as a major financial gateway in West Africa, supporting corporate financing, sovereign borrowing, and investment mobilization. Nigeria's capital market has continued to play a strategic role in mobilizing long-term finance for economic growth, fiscal sustainability, and infrastructure investment.
Director General of Debt Management Office, Patience Oniha, stated that infrastructure, innovation, and capital markets are key to Nigeria's growth and job creation. She also noted that the capital market has enabled government financing.
I see three very key words. I see infrastructure, I see innovation, and I see capital markets. We know that this is really the path. If I take all of them together, this is the path to growth and development, which is what we need to achieve very quickly in Nigeria to attain our goals, job creation, and similar laudable objectives that the government has.
As we continue to strengthen infrastructure, drive innovation, and deepen our capital markets, we must remain committed to policies and partnerships that foster sustainable economic growth.
These are the backbone of Nigeria's economy and providing jobs and services to communities. Despite their importance, many small business owners face significant challenges from accessing funding to stiff market competition. Moneyline with Nancy connected with some Nigerian entrepreneurs and got insight on their struggles, strategies, and success.
Be overwhelming when faced alone. Regardless of the business location, launching and maintaining a business can be a very complicated and hard task. But with patience, knowledge, and hard work, one can achieve a great deal of success. According to the Director General of SMIDAN, Dr. Charles Odi, he announced that there has been a presidential approval for the free registration of 250,000 businesses in partnership with the Corporate Affairs Commission. He further went ahead to mention that before COVID, there were approximately 41 million SMEs, and after COVID, approximately 3 million SMEs were lost. The current statistic stands at 39.2 million SMEs. SMIDAN said that improving access to credit, especially single-digit interest loans and grants, will enable small businesses. Statistically, roughly 20% of small businesses fail within the first year, and about for 96% of businesses and 84% of employment. According to Smithson, data from early 2025 shows that the sector contributes 48% to the GDP. In Nigeria's fast-growing entrepreneurial scene, small businesses are the uncelebrated heroes, the heartbeat of Nigeria's economy. From hectic market stores to progressive startups, they are driving innovation and economic growth. Yet, many entrepreneurs are faced with significant obstacles, from managing cash flow, marketing and competition, to rising costs and inflation. But despite these challenges, many small businesses thrive through strategic planning, adaptability, and support from community. Nigerians mentioned that unstable power supply is one of the biggest challenges they are currently facing with their businesses. According to them, their businesses require constant electricity, forcing them to rely heavily on generator due to inconsistent power supply. Despite all these challenges, Nigerians still remain resilient and motivated. As Pascal says, and I quote, "I am focused about what I want for myself and the future. That is what keeps me motivated."
The big challenge that I'm facing in my business is just power outage. Most of the times, because the kind of thing I do, I am under production. But because of epileptic nature of light in this country, it affects it greatly. But being that I'm highly focused and I know what I'm doing, most of the times I create my own avenue by making use of a generator and other things, because I must survive with or without the is that I have focus of where I'm to my goal, because I know that life is full of ups and downs, and I must push harder in order to get to my desired goal. The state of economy of this nation is affecting virtually every sector, and definitely we should not expect everything to come from government. We'll go think out of the box in making sure that we achieve our desired end.
Some talked about not having another alternative, citing that some job offers comes with a certain age requirement and they do not fit within the age range.
It's not that the business is paying me, but we are just doing it because of we don't have any other option to do it. There's no any other work for me to do. Because if I apply work now, they will say under 13 or 18, and I'm up to that amount. So
you can set up a business. You can give somebody 100K to set up a business, but funny enough, that 100K won't bring anything for the person. Can just be managing herself with that 100K. Nothing did that 100K. Even you will be guy myself. You take 100K, go before you set up a small business, but just budget yourself where, say, if you want really the gain from that business, budget how you want a plan and where before you enter that kind of business.
Looking around us, we see countless of businesses flourish every day, and some actually fail, preventing many people from wanting to take a risk and stepping into the world of entrepreneurship. Despite facing significant challenges, entrepreneurs show remarkable resilience and adaptability, and with support and opportunities, small businesses can thrive and drive economic growth.
Break, and when we return, Dr. Abraham Nwankwo will be joining me to speak public debt. Should we begin to rethink our strategy? All that and more when we come back from the break. To stay.
Colloquium, unwrap joy, unleash taste.
On Moneyline with Nancy.
How, for example, that communications has been going up, the stock, I think 229, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? But, and the market, for example, the equities market has been on steroids.
It is.
It has. It's been on steroids for the past 2 years or so. What exactly is happening? And how do we take advantage?
Well, I don't want to limit it to equities market, but let's even start with equities. If you look at equities, there are sectors in the equities market that have become like the bellwethers. For instance, the agricultural sector. The likes of Okumu, the likes of Presco, The simple is that these people produce crude palm oil. And because the demand for crude palm oil far outweighs in terms of duties, so their market, they have an assured market. And they mark their local prices to even international prices, the dollar prices. So that sector provides strong opportunities. Then the consumer goods sector, because of low household purchasing power, they are fractionalizing their products. And I think this
is Moneyline with Nancy, and this is a program that sets your business day for you.
Inflation played a 9-1 on us, and the cost of doing business and the cost of living crisis persists. But we can win. We can win on those two things.
We need to work on our infrastructure. Isn't it interesting to you that it's still costless to ship something from China to Lagos than from Dakar to...
Resilience is about the ability to adapt, the ability to innovate, the ability to thrive. In a VUCA world, we have a lot of uncertainty.
Thank you, Nancy. You've been doing a great job in trying to educate Nigerians, and we must appreciate you for that.
Everybody tells me you're the gold standard in this business, yeah?
Well, Nancy Naji, do the best you can be, and put that change that you want. Welcome to Moneyline with Nancy. Of course, this is the trusted source for in-depth conversation on finance, the economy, and everything in between. I am Nancy Naji.
The Abuja Treaty foresees that we have to adopt as Africa a linear model of integration of our market. We foresee, in terms of the agreement, that Africa one day will be a customs union.
That's a great question, Nancy. So you have basically two pillars here. There are things that you must do now because you are in an emergency situation. You have to provide helping hands to those who cannot cope anymore. The extreme poor people who cannot really afford to have food on their table. There is no time to wait for the perfect plan for them. You need to provide support immediately for them.
If the world wants to be more resilient, they need to deconcentrate supply chains and locate them. And why not? Relocate them in those regions that didn't have them in the first place. If you want to build resilience, it's not concentrating them again in another country.
How can you move your goods from point A to point B and demand? So it's also us educating our businesses, advocacy, the courage to trade, the courage. Nigerians have it.
I am Nancy Naji, be the best you can be.
The debate about
Welcome to Moneyline with Nancy. Of course, this is the trusted source for in-depth conversation on finance, the economy, and everything in between. I am Nancy Naji.
The Abuja Treaty foresees that we have to adopt as a market. We foresee, in terms of the agreement, that Africa one day will be a customs union?
That's a great question, Nancy. So you have basically two pillars here. There are things that you must do now because you are in an emergency situation. You have to provide helping hands to those who cannot cope anymore. The extreme poor people who cannot really afford to have food on their table. There is no time to wait for the perfect plan for them.
Resilient. They need to deconcentrate supply chains and locate them. And why not? Relocate them in those regions that didn't have them in the first place. If you want to build resilience, it's not concentrating them again in another country.
How can you move your goods from point A to point B and demand?
Dr. Abraham Nwankwo joins me right now and is joining me virtually from Enugu. Dr. Nwankwo, good to see you. Happy many years.
Good morning, Nancy.
Good morning, and good to have you on the program today.
Good morning, and good morning to Nigerians, to all IIT viewers all over the world. Good morning to Nigerian friends.
Good to see you, Doctor. You're not looking bad. Are you aging at all? I remember the last time I interviewed you as the DG of DMO. You still look the same.
When you appreciate the blessings God has given to this country, you cannot but feel happy and very hopeful and very positive.
Good. Now, let's get started. We have a serious conversation ahead of us. Let's begin with the basics. How long has Nigeria, you can speak to it a little, but answer this question. How long have we been borrowing as a country?
Well, we would say Nigeria has been borrowing for more than 118 years. This loan was under the colonial government, and that was in 1958 for the purpose of improving the rail lines and also extending the rail lines to Borno in the northeast of Nigeria. That were times. Nigeria's first loan as an independent country was actually in 1962, and that was to finance. And the good news about this is that when you go back and read the documents relating to that loan, why we applied for it in 1962 and how we used it, it was so positive. It was going to transform the economy, and it did. The issues to be addressed with the law were well specified, how it will link up to the rural areas, how it makes sure that goods produced in Nigeria can find their way out of the country, and the necessary inputs needed from outside, particularly. So when you read back, you see that it's a long time Nigeria started really being positive about what can be done for economy to be great.
Doctor, so Nigeria has been...
One of the essences of my book is to go back to history, go back to the beginning. First of all, so we can be in politics, in culture, in science. We should build our history, and we should go back and do research and make sure we build it from the beginning so that future society.
Doctor, since you said it's over 120 years that Nigeria has been borrowing, what recurring structural weaknesses do you see in Nigeria's borrowing model? You've talked about our borrowing history. From what you've studied so far, do you think that those structural weaknesses are perhaps political? Are they institutional? Is it revenue-based? Or is it even federal in nature? What is our recurring structural weakness?
It is all of those. And let me say it is all of those, and it is all of those in many other countries, but in different proportions and with different levels of effective response. As I said, the book, the history and problems of Nigeria's public debt, from 1900 to 2017, goes back from the beginning, so that we can see all the mistakes, all the challenges, but also all the triumphs. They were also triumphs. And I might mention some of them as we go along. So it is to give us the full picture so that we can be discussing intelligently with enough information so that our discussions are well informed. Now, in terms of what are the challenges, of course, let me start from the most pertinent ones, most recent ones that should inform our strategy moving forward. Let us look at how responsible Nigeria's borrowing is. Let us also look at how responsible the lending of major lenders, particularly the World Bank, is. Yes. That is important. Okay? Now, if I started with the World Bank, as you know, the World Bank, among the multinationals, the World Bank accounts for most of the loans to Nigeria. As a for example, I think it was as much as over 70%. And for most of the years, it's more than 70%. That's from the World Bank alone. So World Bank is, so knowing how effective borrowing is for Nigeria, external borrowing, it's important to look at the World Bank. Again, why should you look at the World Bank? Remember, the World Bank is a reservoir of global expertise. That they know it all as far as development financing is concerned. So it's good to know how far have they gone with Nigeria. Now, again, the history we have done tells us that as of today, and particularly up to 2017, the World Bank had given Nigeria over 130 loans. Okay? Yes. And those funded over 373 projects and accounted for more than $650 billion US. Starting from the first one, the Nigeria Railway loan under the colonial times, which was in 1958. Now, position this intervention with the goal of the World Bank, which is to suppress poverty in as many countries as possible and to accelerate growth. And then you look at it and you find challenges, you find issues, you have questions. The first of all, as you know, is that even after dealing with Nigeria for more than 65 years, okay, poverty in Nigeria is still one of the worst. Let's just take the statistics of the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. For 2022, for example, okay, it's talking about 63% of the population living in multidimensional poverty, okay? Now, so what it means from that point of view, anecdotally, you can say that the World Bank has not been able to reduce poverty in Nigeria, having operated there for 650 years. Yes. And that led our research to go into the World Bank documents itself. What does the World Bank say? How does it want to do its job? How did it do it? And what was its own assessment of itself? This is crucial. And we came across very interesting things. First of all is that from a development economic point of view, you will find out that you ask yourself, how come that when the World Bank gives a loan to Nigeria, it does not emphasize productivity? There's no debt productivity plan attached to the loan, okay? Now, the World Bank wouldn't insist that
It seems we're having network issues. Okay, doctor, I can hear you now. Yes, go ahead.
Good. So it can be justified. So the World Bank fails to link its new loans to the existing ones. It fails to link its new loans to future ones. It fails to link its loans to synergize with the private sector projects. So in totality, the World Bank's approach to interventions in terms of financing is very fragmented, and it lacks that development consciousness. It simply gives the loans as if it is just a commercial bank. You give your loan, you collect back, and next time you give another one. But that is wrong. As you know, the World Bank is supposed to be interested in development. Therefore, it cannot simply give loans without looking at the impact. For example, the World Bank gave a loan for Nigeria's Third Fadama project. That was 2008 to 2013. At the end of it, the World Bank assessed itself at their own evaluation. Now, everything I'm saying about World Bank is derived from their own reports, from their own documents. They evaluated the 10th Fadama project and gave themselves a satisfactory mark that they did well. That is very curious. That's very worrisome. Why? Remember, I have listed a number of defects in the way these loans are disbursed. So how to World Bank, in the presence of those gaps, no linkages, the fragmentation, the fact of not emphasizing productivity, the fact of not emphasizing that this debt must continue producing to be able to contribute to its repayment and therefore debt sustainability. And in the end of it, it gives itself a pass mark. Unfortunately, if you as a Nigerian decide to take account of World Bank projects in Nigeria, particularly agricultural projects in the rural areas, when you go there, you are likely to see signboards of the World Bank describing the project in the bush. You better not see any agricultural project. So the question is, how come the World Bank, in trying to give loans, does not consider that it has failed in the past? Rather, from time to time, it gives itself a pass mark. Now, unfortunately, after the Fadama project, World Bank gave another loan to Nigeria that is very closely related. That's the Transformation Irrigation Management in Nigeria project, which is essential irrigation agricultural. So you would have expected that in designing and implementing this new project, which was in 2014, you would expect that the World Bank will look at the mistakes, the challenges, the lessons learned from the Fadama 3 project. But when you go to the documentation from beginning to end of this new project in 2014, which was after the Fadama project, you don't see any mention of the Fadama project in the whole design. That is very strange, isn't it? Very strange.
Okay, Doctor.
So these are the type of problems you see with World Bank loans. Now, let's come to ourselves, our country. How have we managed the process of the loans? Okay? Have we managed them irresponsibly? And the simple way, again, is to go to history. Look at the statistics. It's not a question of guessing or speculating. When you look at the statistics, from 2000 to 2023, 24 years, look at our current balance. That is your revenue minus your current expenditure, okay? Of course, you know, when your revenue minus your current expenditure is positive, it means that you are doing well. You are fiscally prudent because after you are using revenue to solve your recurrent problems, and then you are having surplus for a capital project, okay?
Yes, Prof. Doctor, go ahead.
Good.
Yes.
And good. Then, but in the case, when it is negative, it means that your revenue is not enough to cover your current expenditure. So, which means whatever you are spending on current expenditure.
Okay, the connection seems to be a bit shaky. Doctor, if you're still there, can you hear me? Let's try to reconnect to Dr. Nwankwo as we X-ray 118 years of Nigeria's public debt. Where we are right now, we are at around 153 trillion naira, according to the Debt Management Office. That is Nigeria's current debt now. Talking about the public debt, of course, we have states, that's the domestic, and we also have the external. So many states are indebted. Lagos State is the most indebted state in the country. Like what you're seeing right now on the screen, I hope my... Okay, Dr. Nwankwo, you're still there? Okay, I can hear you now. So
yes,
come
I'm
in.
here.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, but from 2015 to 2023, 9 years, the revenue was lower than the recurrent expenditure, which means we were borrowing to fund
finance recurrent
expenditure.
Yes.
Which is second-degree profligacy. Not only are you not able to save something for capital expenditure, but you are also borrowing for recurrent expenditure. That is second-degree profligacy. But a more serious issue has been reviewed in the history. And what is it? For those 9 years that Nigeria was having fiscal profligacy, 2015 to 2023, 6 years out of those 9 bad years were even terrible. What does it mean to be terrible? And that is third-degree profligacy. The amount we were spending borrowing to spend on recurrent items was more than the amount we are borrowing to spend on capital. Which means, first of all, you are not saving anything from your revenue for capital, number one. Number two, after spending all your revenue on recurrent, you still go and take from borrowing for recurrent. That is second degree. And the third degree, in addition that you are borrowing for recurrent expenditure, what you are borrowing for recurrent expenditure is bigger than what you are borrowing for capital expenditure. That's a recurrent expenditure dominance rate. That is third degree profligacy. So history shows us that this has happened the way we have used our borrowed money over these years. And both, we can say therefore for some years for Nigeria, we can see areas of fiscal profligacy and irresponsible borrowing. Yeah. Now, to ask, maybe there were peculiar developments in the economy that constrained us to behave in that manner on the fiscal sector. You could argue, for example, that in 2019 there was COVID and all economies all over the world, we are borrowing excessively for recurrent expenditure. That is correct. We tested it for Nigeria to be able to find an excuse. But in the case of Nigeria, we found out that the fiscal profligacy had been on 5 continuous years before COVID. So if it had been on for 5 years before COVID, you cannot use COVID to explain why we had to derail. So we can only confirm that that was the true nature of things. It had nothing to do with the global shock from COVID. So the conclusion would be that for some years in Nigeria, there was fiscal profligacy. And that means that we really have to be careful and appreciate what it means to borrow. We don't just borrow for anything. We have to borrow thinking about its repayment, its sustainability. And the sustainability starts in terms of the initial application before you consider the effectiveness of the application. Once you apply it to the wrong thing, you have already missed it. And in the case of the World Bank, there's evidence that the World Bank lending to Nigeria was relatively irresponsible. And this is important given that the World Bank has the reservoir of knowledge. They have the technical competence. They are the number one in the world. So if they're making such mistakes, we have to look deeper to know why is this so. Is it deliberate? Indeed, some scholars insist, like Yakubu and Co., insist that it's deliberate. But the important thing that history shows us that this is what has happened.
Okay.
And it is all confirmed by their own documents.
Dr. Nwankwo, let me come in now because I've listened to you very keenly, and thank you for, the succinct capture of what you have said. In our borrowing model, do you think that the Fiscal Responsibility Act has been attended to, that while we are borrowing, do we adhere to the rules according to the Fiscal Responsibility Act? Because we are not even supposed to borrow for consumption or for recurrent expenditure as it were, apart from the COVID example which you had earlier, because the world was shut down and the world needed some kind of lifeline. Apart from that, what do you think is the role of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission moving ahead, that is Fiscal Responsibility Act, yes, in our borrowing model?
Thank you very much. The Fiscal Responsibility Act is supposed to address these problems. However, we must move forward from the Fiscal Responsibility Act even to parliamentary oversight. Ultimately, the Parliament is responsible for appropriating the budget, including the borrowing plan, okay? And therefore, that's why in the book, we also delve into the issue of failure of the Parliament to effectively oversight borrowing and use of borrowing. And the conclusion from the study is that the Parliament has not been playing its role, because the Parliament will play its role by making sure that the law, there are enough provisions in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria about how to borrow and how to use the process of borrowing. And in addition, the fiscal responsibility law itself is something that should also guide the Parliament, the legislature, to make sure that things don't go wrong. However, the truth is that when you go through the story, it shows that the legislature has not been playing its role. And we went into the issue of why, how. Why is it that our legislature is not playing its role effectively in terms of oversight of fiscal issues, particularly borrowing? And we came to the conclusion that there is a high degree of emphasis, first of all, on my party. I'm interested in my party. So whatever government is in power, whatever it does is right. And this goes across all parties. Once a government is in power and they have majority in the National Assembly, whatever they do is endorsed by the National Assembly, by the majority, who now decide what happens. That is one. Secondly, we also found out that overall, our legislature, our parliamentarians are also not keen on what is good for the society as such. They're interested in pursuing their own interests. And there's enough evidence in the book based on reports from various agencies responsible for scrutinizing what the parliament does, each pattern of expenditure, the way it approves budget, and all that. The parliament itself has been part of the problem instead of the solution.
Okay.
And so that is our state of affairs. But that does not mean that we should lose hope. But the point that we have to agree that we have done it very, very badly, relatively. And let me point out here that one of the major challenges, one of the major problems arising from this is that all the good work Nigeria Debt Management Office has been doing over the years. Yes. Having effective access. Our debt management office is among the best in the world. If you rank the 5 in Africa, Nigeria must be there in terms of debt management. And that's why the confidence investors have in Nigeria, stakeholders have in the DMO, is such that if Nigeria wants to raise money domestically, it will succeed. If it wants to raise money externally, even from the international capital market, not just the multilaterals, it will also succeed. Most times, oversubscription. So our debt management office is one of the best you can get. You are among the best in Africa and is one of the best in the world. However, that competence may become a curse if the fiscal authorities are not making sure the process are effectively, efficiently, and judiciously used, and that leakages are minimized. So that is a challenge. So we have to put that, side by side. The efficacy of public debt manager and the level of degree of responsibility of the fiscal authorities in terms of focusing on solving the society's problem instead of focusing on private problems.
Dr. Nwankwo, let's start looking at the solutions now. As someone that is experienced, you've done this, you've been at the helm of affairs of the DMO, you were there for 10 years. Perhaps when the going was good, I must say, we also had the Paris Club exit. And you've seen from where we have somersaulted from, if I could use that word, from the Paris Club exit to where we are right now. I mentioned earlier we're at 153 trillion naira, according to Debt Management Office, the current figures. So what should we begin to do right now? Because from also what I hear you say, I asked you a deliberate question earlier, who should we blame our structural weakness on? That is in terms of moral model, is it political, is it institutional? But what I see from your analysis also is that the political will has a lot to play, has a lot of issues that we should take up with them, because it seems when you just talked about DMO being one of the best in Africa. If you're executive, who are the politicians come up and say, you guys need to do this? What can an institution then do? So bearing in mind with all of this and what you've said, the role of the World Bank in terms of our public debt, what should be the solutions going forward? Prof, Doctor, perhaps you should give me three solutions.
Yes. First of all, to be able to think of the way forward, let us appreciate, as you mentioned tangentially, that there have been periods of successes, great successes, and even triumphs. A number of them. If we go back to the same history, you find out that during the Nigeria-Biafran Civil War, 1967 to 1970, Nigeria did not borrow $1 externally, $1 externally to fund this war. When you compare this, because the book also revealed this, if you go and look at countries like the United States and France, you find out that in some of their wars, they borrowed heavily from external sources. But Nigeria was able to avoid that during its 3-year war. So that shows you that we have capacity to triumph. And a second example you have mentioned is the exit from the Paris Club debt under Obasanjo and the ministership of Dr. Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala when we exited from the Paris Club debt club. That was a triumph, unprecedented achievement. The third one, of course, we can say that the fact that after exit from the Paris Club, after debt overhang, within a few years, less than 10 years, Nigeria built one of the most robust domestic debt markets in Africa. That is a triumph. So that shows we have the capacity. Now, so we should console ourselves that we also have points of triumph along the 118 years history that we have surveyed. However, what do we do to continue to do better in the future and make sure we close our chapters that we are not so triumphant? The emphasis is on political will. Exactly. There's no substitute for political will. There's no substitute. How it can be done physically, spiritually, culturally, politically, economically, militarily. But the bottom line is there's no substitute for political will in building a nation. Whether you need the political will for the right economy, you need the political will for the right politics. You need political will for the right educational system and reward system. You need political will, there are no substitute. How do we encourage it? Now, the various civil societies that are serious about continuing
Doctor, are you still there? Okay. The network has done another one on us. Of course, I've been speaking with Dr. Abraham Nwankwo, who was a former Director General at the Debt Management Office, and we've been looking at 118 years of Nigeria's public debt, rethinking the strategy, of course, what he's been saying. In the last few minutes, the World Bank has advanced more than 130 loans to Nigeria. Political will is important, like I mentioned earlier, because you can't do anything without political will. He also did mention earlier that the Debt Management Office, our own DMO, is one of the best in Africa, yet we are seeing some of those challenges. There are also some triumphs along the way, like I also did mention, talking about the Paris Club exit. Okay, Dr. Nwankwo, you're back?
Yes, I'm back.
Yes, so please just summarize as we close.
Yes, let me summarize. So it is all about political will. So we encourage all Nigerians, all stakeholders, civil society, trade unions, journalists, doctors, lecturers, professors, students. We should continue cutting our political leaders. We should continue having close discussions with them, serious discussions with them. Let all of us realize that the greatest happiness you get is looking back to how you helped to develop the society such that your children and grandchildren and your great-great-grandchildren will enjoy a better society. That is the ultimate. So if we have that mindset that our joy, our happiness can only come from doing the right thing for the society and not just for ourselves. And if we also realize that fortunately there is enough for everyone in this country, there's enough for everyone. So there's no need to behave as if I don't get this, the other person will take it and I'll be deprived. So we should work closely with our politicians. We should continue to encourage them, to discuss with them, to appreciate the gravity of their responsibility, that their responsibility is grave. Thank you.
Doctor, before I let you go, when is your book coming out? When am I getting a copy? Of course, you gave me the small piece, which I've read, and that's why we're doing this.
The book, as you know, was published by Cambridge Scholars Publishers in the UK. I'm entitled as an author to only 4 copies, so I hope I will soon be able to.
Oh, Dr. Nwankwo is gone again. The network is just shaky this morning. I don't know what's happening from Enugu. All right, I've been speaking with Dr. Abraham Nwankwo, and we've been talking about the history, the problems, as well as the lessons and some of the solutions that we need to get across borrowing a model. Dr. Abraham Nwankwo is the former Director General of the Debt Management Office from 2007 to 2017, and he's been speaking to... Okay, Doctor, I can see you now, so please land on your point quickly.
So, the book can be accessed from Amazon. Before the month ends, it should be on sale on Amazon, and from the publishers directly, Cambridge Scholars Publishing, direct from them from Amazon. But I will endeavor to get as many copies as I can afford to make available to as many stakeholders within the country as possible.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doctor. Dr. Abraham Nwankwo, former Director General of the Debt Management Office, speaking to me in the last few minutes. And I must say that as I close this morning, one truth stands out, that debt may not actually be the problem. Debt without discipline is, from what he has said, and Nigeria has faced challenges before, negotiated a historic exit from the Paris Club. We rebuilt credibility, we returned to global capital markets, but access to credit is not the same as economic strength, I must say. Because when borrowing is not tied to productive capital, when recurrent expenditure outpaces investment, like we're seeing now, we're not seeing a lot of capital expenditure. When oversight weakens, the lawmakers, for instance, the debt productivity chain breaks, and when it breaks, the cost does not vanish. It is passed on to future taxpayers and future generations. Dr. Abraham Nwankwo, of course, after 10 years of Director General of the DMO, now documents a century of Nigeria's borrowing in his new book, reminding us that debt crises are not accidents, they are policy choices. The real question is whether Nigeria borrows. It is whether Nigeria can borrow wisely and create value with every naira raised. It's been nice having you, Dr. Nwankwo. I hope to speak with you again soon. Yes, I hope to speak with you again soon. I am Nancy Naji. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. The news is up next. Have a productive day.